This first video has nothing to see, only darkness. Put the phone down, take a seat. If you're in a rush, wait until you're in bed, and listen. This story really happened.
On March 18, 1990, at exactly 1:30 a.m., a white car slid to a stop outside the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts. Red lights flashed on its roof, just like an unmarked car from a special unit. Two men stepped out in full police uniform, badges visible, movements brisk and assured. They approached the night watchman and spoke in clipped, official tones. They'd received report of suspicious activity inside. Even the alarm had pinged them. They needed to get in, now. Instead of buzzing them through, the guard raised a hand. 1 minute, he said, and disappeared. The officers exchanged a look. It was an odd move. Do they pull back? Press forward? The air felt wrong. Too quiet, too expectant. Before the indecision could harden into action, the guard returned, unlocked the door, and waved them in. 81 minutes later, the magnitude of what had begun would be clear. The greatest art theft in modern history. But this story isn't only about a heist. It's about the investigations and the tangled theories that followed, the kind that left even hardened gang leaders baffled. The motive made no sense. Suspicions jumped from city to city, and at one point even toward Lebanon. Contradictions piled up until no one could say, with confidence, who the culprit was or what they truly wanted. My aim here is to lay the pieces out cleanly so the picture comes into focus. To do that, we need to start at the beginning. How the thieves moved, what they took, and why tiny moments, like a guard vanishing for 60 seconds, would ripple outward and change everything. Back to that night. The two uniformed men stepped into the museum. Something felt off, the sort of instinct that prickles the skin before the mind can name it. Barely a minute later, they called over the guard who had admitted them. His name was Richard Abath, 23 years old. One of the men flashed an ID. "You're under arrest." Shock flared across Abath's face. Why had he disappeared? Where had he gone? His own strange behavior made him an easy target for suspicion. Abath didn't fight. Calmly, he turned and they cuffed his hands behind his back. A quick search, no weapon. "Where are the other guards?" they asked. He told them. Tape pressed over his mouth, a blindfold drawn across his eyes, he was led to the museum's maintenance room. Time, they said, was tight. No chance to call in reinforcements, the two of them would handle it. Systematically, methodically, Abath down, they moved for the second guard, then the third, then the surveillance supervisor. One by one, they were rounded up, bound and tucked into the same maintenance room. "Check the cameras," the first man told the second. "I'll stay with them and contact the station. We need investigators and backup. This isn't a routine incident. If the guards and the surveillance head are involved, it's bigger than it looks." 8 paintings, worth $500 million, were about to vanish into the dark. And the strangest details were still to come. The guard sat stunned, too shocked to speak. None of them had sensed anything was wrong until it was far too late. One officer stepped out toward the surveillance room. Moments later, the second slipped from the maintenance room as well, pulled the door shut, and locked it. No radio call to the station, no request for backup, no detectives on the way. 2 o'clock. Then 3. The museum was a tomb. No footsteps in the galleries, no voices in the halls. Trapped inside the maintenance room, the guards pounded on the door, calling out, dread rising with every unanswered knock. No one came. They weren't freed until morning when the day shift arrived, and by then, the world would learn the truth. The museum had been robbed. And those 2 men? They weren't police at all. They were the thieves. But before we follow them further, you need to understand something essential. Why steal famous art in the first place? On paper, it sounds ridiculous. A renowned painting is the most recognizable contraband on Earth. Every museum, registry, and law enforcement database knows where it should be.
So how do you sell it? Where could you even show it? Possessing it is practically a confession. Take a masterpiece like the Mona Lisa. Today, works of that stature are often outfitted with layers of security and tracking, some systems woven into the canvas and frame so deeply you'd have to destroy the piece to fully remove them. Even then, museums run sophisticated protection inside their walls. Logically, the whole scheme seems pointless. And yet, masterpieces are stolen. Why? First, in the underworld, stolen art functions as an unofficial currency. Imagine I steal a legendary painting valued at $500 million. In certain circles, major syndicates and powerful, secretive actors, such a piece can move for its full, real price, because what's being bought isn't just art, it's a high-value, portable asset with mystique. Over time, as headlines drum on and the museum leaves an empty space where the work once hung, the perceived value climbs. One buyer pays a fortune, then flips it for more, and so on. The narrative, the risk, the chase all inflate its worth in those circles. Firm. Second, leverage. A stolen masterpiece is a pressure device. Museums do not simply replace it and move on. They leave the frame empty, a public wound that keeps attention and pressure alive. The longer the piece remains missing, the greater its symbolic power. That power can be used in negotiations, trades, or darker bargains where money isn't the only currency. That's why some people steal paintings whose images are burned into the world's memory, not to hang them over a fireplace, but because, in the right hands, absence itself becomes valuable.
With a trophy like that in hand, a crew can walk straight to a government and say, "The painting is with us. Here are our terms. Money, favors, safe passage for a certain someone." It sounds outrageous, but deals like that have been floated. Whoever holds a stolen masterpiece holds a bargaining chip that can bend powerful people. Pay $1 billion for the work, and then use it to leverage benefits worth many times more. From the outside, it looks tidy. Interpol tracks down the culprits, triumphantly returns the art. In reality, the board is crowded, with intelligence outfits and shadowy intermediaries trading pressure for concessions. There's another motive, too: black market investing. In certain circles, a stolen masterpiece functions like an off-ledger asset. Ultra-wealthy buyers stash it for 10 or 20 years. When it resurfaces, the price can be astronomical. Some treat it as the ultimate status symbol, a private boast no one else can verify, a priceless, missing work hanging in a hidden salon. History is full of cases where missing antiquities reappeared only after quiet negotiations. If laws truly allowed every region to reclaim what was taken over centuries, entire maps of museums would empty overnight. The global art world has tangled. Even learned societies and institutions aren't immune. Deals for missiles and jets have moved more easily than certain statues, because, strangely enough, art can unlock doors that money alone cannot. Here's the twist. None of those familiar motives fits what happened at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. That's what makes this case so unnerving. Back to the night itself. Once the guards were immobilized, the two men headed straight for the surveillance hub. They disabled the alarm's audio and video feeds and, most crucially, cut the live link between the museum and the police. The system kept sending signals, but with no sirens, no cameras, and no connection to the station, those signals might as well have been whispers in a sealed room. Then they moved into the galleries. They worked with knives. Canvases were sliced from their frames, some were torn, some frames splintered, damage scarring the walls like claw marks. By the end, they had taken 11 paintings. They also lifted an ancient Chinese cup, said to be over 7,000 years old, and a golden-hued bronze eagle finial, the emblem that once crowned Napoleon's standard. Altogether, the haul was valued at $500 million, and that was only the beginning.
By any measure, this was the most expensive art theft in history. You might be tempted to shrug at a figure like $500 million until you consider the scale. A canvas, barely 40 by 60 centimeters, commanding 50 million on its own. Think about everything you've created in your life. Every page, every sketch, then stack that against a single painting worth more than entire skyscrapers. The numbers warp the imagination. From entry to exit, the thieves spent 81 minutes inside. They walked out through the front like they owned the place, climbed into their waiting car, and vanished. No clean photographs, no fingerprints worth a lead, no faces to scrutinize. Nothing. If they'd been ghosts, they couldn't have left fewer traces. When investigators finally swept the scene, a baffling pattern emerged. The thieves took certain pieces and ignored others of enormous value. Works by titans like Michelangelo and Botticelli, smaller and easier to carry, possibly worth more than what was taken. This wasn't a smash-and-grab line sweep. They selected specific items, seemingly without a neat theme linking them. And their methods were crude. Canvases slashed out with knives, some frames splintered, fragments left behind. If they were in a rush, why linger for 81 minutes? By the technique they used, grabbing everything on their list shouldn't have taken more than 8 or 10. That gap has driven people mad with speculation. The conclusion many lean toward, one I find hard to dismiss, is that they took something else as well. Something far more sensitive than the art, a prize with no label and no frame. Could it simply be inexperience? Maybe they didn't know what they were doing, grabbed what looked valuable and fumbled the rest. It's possible, but unlikely. Another hypothesis, someone hired them and handed over a precise shopping list. The year was 1990. The investigation ground on, but leads evaporated. Let's talk suspects. First up, James Whitey Bulger. His reputation? If something precious went missing, you could, in theory, find a path to it through him. He was known for brokering with powerful institutions, recovering stolen art for a price, and using it to negotiate. If he'd had a hand in the Gardner theft, he would have likely hinted he could fix it. Yet, after 5 years of scrutiny, no link stuck. Even he seemed taken aback by the job's audacity. Next, the Italian mafia. Rumors swirled. The case brimmed with their name. Flat conclusion, investigators chased it hard and found nothing solid. Which brings us back to the night watchman, Richard Abath, the man who said, "1 minute," and disappeared. Why did he step away? The explanation sounded ridiculous, but proved true. His hands weren't clean because he was eating. He went to wash up, then returned and opened the door. Here's the sting. Before he ever took the job, Abath was thoroughly trained for exactly this scenario. No one was to be admitted, under any circumstances, not even the President of the United States at the time, George H.W. Bush. And yet, that night, the door swung open.
So why did he let those two men in? And why couldn't he describe them later? Investigators discovered he'd been drinking on duty. Richard Abath was suspended for a year, and the scrutiny didn't end there. It took 9 long years before he was fully cleared. The facts sounded absurd. A guard who washed his hands while police warned of a break-in, who then admitted them despite strict rules against it, and who was intoxicated. It seemed too foolish to be anything but suspicious, yet in the end, authorities concluded he wasn't involved. Who then? Let's count the leading theories. First, the Italian mafia, which held serious sway in Boston at the time. 3 of their leaders landed in prison and were later released, yet the paintings never resurfaced. To some, that smelled like a back-channel bargain. Perhaps the thieves traded something unknown for those releases. Perhaps the artworks ended up in an intelligence vault. Or perhaps there's no connection at all, and we're just seeing patterns in fog. Second, armed groups in Lebanon. Certain reports claimed secret shipments went into Lebanon during that period, and later shipments of similar weight and shape departed, suggesting the loot was sold on. The theory exists, but it convinces some observers less than others. Too often, blame is cast along familiar lines without solid proof. Third, the possibility of U.S. intelligence itself. According to various accounts, agencies sometimes use cultural property as leverage in quiet negotiations. We can get your artifacts back if you give us X. In high-stakes geopolitical bargaining, lines blur and methods harden. The point is to win the file, seal the deal, and move on. The claim here isn't about specifics so much as the principle. In the murk where states haggle, art can be a tool. Set the speculation aside, and one stark image remains. At the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, the empty frames are still on the walls, each label still naming the absent work. 35 years on, the case remains open. A reward, publicized as $100 million, stands for information leading to recovery. There are no usable videos of the culprits, no clear shots of their car, no definitive trail. It's as if the story ended somewhere off stage. The deal, whatever it was, concluded in a room no one can find. What feels certain is this: the two perpetrators were no amateurs. Jobs of this scale are usually run by full crews. Here, two people executed with precision, studied the layout, knew exactly what they wanted, and were confident enough to linger for 81 minutes. They pulled it off. To this day, it's a riddle without an answer. If there's one takeaway, it's this: somewhere in this world, deals are struck that defy ordinary imagination, between nameless negotiators for stakes that eclipse the price of gold and the reach of law. That's where the Gardner heist seems to live, not only in museums and case files, but in that shadowy marketplace of leverage and absence.